to do a little brief historical overview, a little story of how I see Southwestern. As Melissa mentioned, I've taught for about a dozen universities, University of Texas, Ohio State, University of Massachusetts. I've been to lots of places, and I think it gives me a perspective that I honestly sometimes don't think the people here even appreciate about themselves, and I want to share a little bit about that. The world of mainstream counseling and psychology, for those of you who are not students of the disciplines, long ago fragmented the human experience into a million pieces. The human experience, which ought to be integrated, was disintegrated, from my perspective, by mainstream academia. As an example, I look at universities, Ohio State and UNM and so on. I even look at the psychology departments, and I see counseling psych, clinical psych, school psych, organizational psych, neuro psych, general psych, health psych. It's unbelievable. They've taken one field and fragmented it into I don't know how many different sub-areas. And that's only the psychology departments. Within the universities, there's biology and chemistry and theology and history, and somehow these have all been parceled out and become territories that somebody owns. And it's kind of a reductionist, fragmented kind of view of the human condition in my mind. Also in my mind, I don't know if it's anybody else's mind. Psychology comes from the tradition of healers and holy people and rabbis and priests and shamans and so on and so forth. It doesn't necessarily, for my mind, lend itself real well to the treatment it's gotten in the more scientifically based universities. So in this fragmentation of psychology and counseling, they effectively threw out the spiritual part of our experience in the world because it's not scientific and you can't measure it. Then they kind of threw out the body part and handed it over to the world of medicine and to the drug companies. So psychology, in trying to figure out what it was going to be about, kept this hypothetical organ or entity called psyche, held on to some behavior stuff that it could measure, and claimed that for its area of expertise. Now I was thinking one could argue that that was just a really bad business decision to give all of that up. The rules of the academy, the rules of traditional university worlds, said that breaking down history and the universe into increasingly smaller pieces, increasingly fragmented pieces, increasingly insignificant pieces, in my mind, was the way to go. The epistemology has got crazy. Epistemology is about how do we acquire knowledge, what is knowledge, how do we know what we know. And science kind of headed in this direction, again, from my perspective, of insisting on increasingly meaningless measurement of increasingly smaller phenomena. And a lot of this is kind of driven by drug companies and insurance companies. So this is the way the field has kind of gone out there. This is the Ohio States and so on and so forth. So back in this little enclave in Santa Fe, New Mexico, these intellectual and spiritual warriors, some would say hooligans, but I'll say warriors, named Robert Waterman and Mary Lou Butler and Catherine Minos and a whole bunch of other folks, the Connie Bucks and Kate Cooks and Janet Shrivers of the world, they just said no. So the whole world was going in this direction, the whole world of psychology and counseling, and the people at Southwestern College just said no. They refused to fragment, they refused to disintegrate the human experience, and they maintained the holistic perspective that you guys know so well from having been here. They refused to throw away the soma, or body, hold on to that. They refused to throw away the spiritual and the ancient traditions, the ancient wisdom. They kind of held strong in that. So by breaking the rules, they actually broke the rules by being traditional, which is kind of ironic, and it's almost borderline oxymoronic. That by embracing tradition, hundreds and sometimes thousands of years old, we became renegades and iconoclasts and rule breakers. So I don't know how that works out, but it seems that's my observation. So the world has started to change. Now APA and ACA, which are the American Psychological Association and the American Counseling Association, they've made some brave new discoveries you might have read about. In recent years, they have discovered the somatics, somatic psychology, the body, and the role it plays in the human condition. Very interesting discovery. They've also discovered spirituality, which is pretty far out on their part. This is the point at which your 14-year-old would say, duh. Kind of like Columbus discovering America, which was a hell of a surprise to the Navajos and the Apache and the Sioux, and a whole bunch of other folks who had imagined they'd already discovered it before. Southwestern College refused to follow the Pied Piper off the cliff. They stood tall, they broke the rules, and they waited for sanity to circle back around to the spot that they refused to vacate in the first place.